All right. Hey, Chris Matthews, I want to just ask you a general question about where we are politically right now. For a lot of people, their defining election was the election of JFK in 1960. For me, for a lot of different reasons, it was Reagan in 1980. And I always remember on the Friday before, it was a toss-up. It was going to be very close. We're trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen this fall. You have a series of polls out showing Donald Trump in the mid-30s. Mitch McConnell's now talking about a knife fight in the Senate. You never really know which way these things are going. But I was just curious, when you were with Tip O'Neill in 1980, did you see it coming? Does it feel like a similar wave this year, or is it just too early to tell?
Well, I really was with him from 81 on, so the 81 had already happened, but 82 was the one I worked on, and we picked up 26 seats, and that felt like a pretty good wave because of Social Security and the recession coming on, and I think the Speaker did a hell of a job of raising those issues. I think this is stronger. I think it's stronger than 26. I think it's a real wave, something like 94, 74. I think the Democrats have picked up 30 to 40 seats in the House, and the Senate is wobbly right now. It's margin of error in country, as you know, all over the country. It looks like these races are coming down to. I think Donnelly's going to win in Indiana now. I think Manchin's going to win now. I think there's some safety for some of these guys, but I think margin of error is like, remember, just as recently as 16, we looked at all those races in Pennsylvania, and everybody said, oh, and Eddie Rendell called me up and said, oh, we'll win by 3. Well, that's margin of error. When you start talking about 2 or 3 points, you don't know what you're talking about. It's too hard to pick. This election is going to be hard to pick, but I do think there's a wave against the president. I think this last week or two have been terrible for him. I looked at the numbers dropping down to the lower 30s for him in approval. And these elections, as you know, Joe, change history for 30 years. People will get elected this November that would have never had a shot. People like who got elected. Tom Foley out in eastern Washington State was elected on a fluke. He filed the last day. He got into the Congress. He served for 30 years. He became Speaker of the House till the next wave came along in 94. It happens. Jim Howard, a high school teacher in New Jersey, got elected for his whole life because of one of these waves. So I think you're going to, and Beto, if Beto wins down there, he's going to be a major national figure pretty quickly.
Oh, my gosh.
But a lot of these people, you're going to see whole careers made or lost, and women running, minority women, women of color. I think the fact that there's so many running, there are going to be so many who win, and they'll be there their whole lives. So I think this election is not just a one-off. I think this election is going to be very big for the Democrats, and they might just win the Senate. It's really going to be powerful stuff.
And by the way, if you see Beto win in 18, you'll probably see him on a ticket in 20 as well.
I agree.
So I want to ask you this question I've been asking people the past few days. Donald Trump was sitting at 44, 45% early spring, and now he's dropped back down into the 30s. I know there are a lot of reasons, maybe child separation, maybe Helsinki. I'm just curious. Why do you think the president was moving into territory where he had some of his higher approval ratings since becoming a politician just 6 months ago, and now he's back mired in the 30s?
Well, the economics, I mean, he's battling his own good economic numbers. He's got great numbers. I mean, who wouldn't be bragging about these unemployment rates down well below 4? And you've got a market that's booming back up there to 2,600. You've got 26,000. You've got great economic numbers. It's him. And, you know, especially during this time we're honoring, we're marking, I guess, we're 9/11. The great thing about 9/11, and there was one great thing about all that horror, in the weeks thereafter, you saw a unity in this country we had never felt since maybe World War II. A tremendous. The yuppies at their sidewalk cafes were cheering the firefighters when they went by in their engines. The class differences were resolved for a while. There was a tremendous looking out for the first responders in a way that was wonderful. People were looking. People, you know, kids when they grow up, they want to be nurses. They want to be firefighters. That's what you want to be when you're 5 or 7 years old. You naturally have a sort of a heroic instinct. You want to be a hero to people. You want to be the good guy or the good woman. And I think that 9/11 brought that instinct of kids out in us. You know, I spoke at the Friendly Sons that spring, and all I had to do was talk about the Irish tradition of firefighting in New York City. And I just started listing names. you know, most of the guys that got killed going up those stairs were Irish because of those long generation after generation traditions in New York City of always being a firefighter. And of course, we had Hispanic guys and African American people too. But there was a tremendous feel about the working class and how important they are in a big city like New York. The working class are the ones that save you when you're in trouble. They're the cops that come. They're the emergency workers. They're the working guys and women who come to save you when you're scared to death you're going to die. And they're the ones that and when you're a yuppie and you make a lot of money and you're a master of the universe, you forget about those people. And you look down on them. Well, you can't. Because in the end, they're the ones that save you. And I think that was the wonderful thing about 9/11, that afterwards people said, you know what, they're the good guys. Not the money guys, they're the good guys. I felt that.
Jeffrey Goldberg, I'm curious your thoughts on, again, Donald Trump's fall from 45% to 36%. I know for a lot of us, and I'll just speak for myself and the media, it all seems bad. I mean, there's an outrageous statement every day. There's a breaching of a constitutional norm every day. Right. So it's tougher for me to figure out why he would be at 44 or 45% after Charlottesville, after retweeting neo-Nazi tweets. But something's happened with independents, especially. Any guess what that may have been over the past 6 months?
Yeah, you know, I've thought about this a lot. Remember when your kids are little and you take them to the circus, and the circus is fun for 2 or 3 hours, but imagine having to sit through the circus for 36 or 48 hours straight, right? Bombarded with the noise and nonsense of a circus. I think people are becoming inured to the drama, and they're becoming tired of the excess drama. And I think, you know, the show is maybe moving past its sell-by date. Maybe that. I mean, the core is going to stay the core, but the core seems to shrink a little bit. And you know, the best thing that Donald Trump obviously could do for Republicans running right now is stop tweeting very strange tweets about the various investigations and about Hillary Clinton, and be, to borrow a term that has that he's employed, be a little bit more presidential. I think just a little bit of quiet might actually help.
And that's, of course, what Gary Cohn was trying to tell him to do. Willie, of course, as you know, most of my political theories go back to Johnny Carson. Carson, who, of course, said you win in Central Time Zone. But also Carson understood he went into people's bedrooms every night. And if he was too shrill, if he had an edge, at some point they would just become exhausted. I've seen that with presidents, too. Every president has a sell-by date. But I will tell you, a lot of my friends in Pensacola that still would vote for Donald Trump tomorrow do say they just don't want to talk about him anymore. They're just exhausted by it all. I wonder if Jeffrey's not right, that independents perhaps who don't feel an undying loyalty to Donald Trump and Republicanism might just say, enough, no mas. I can't take the madness anymore.
Well, there are plenty of Republicans, and you know, we talk to a lot of the same people, or people you talk to on the street, who voted for Donald Trump because he was changed. He was going to shake it up because they didn't like Hillary Clinton. But if you look in those numbers from the CNN poll that we had yesterday among independents, he's lost 33% of independents in a month. He was at 47, and he's down to 31. So, Chris, if your theory is true, if Democrats have a wave and they take the House and maybe even the Senate, if this is the culture we have right now politically with Donald Trump owning Washington, he's got the House, he's got the Senate, what does Washington look like when he's got an adversarial House or maybe an adversarial Senate?
Well, as Richard Nixon discovered in the middle of the night when he won re-election with almost every state, he had lost the subpoena power again. Yeah. I think he said at the Colson in the middle of the night, we lost it again. He knew what was coming. The subpoena power means that Jerry Nadler can spend months of 19 getting ready for something, whether it's impeachment or not, but it's certainly not going to be pleasant for the president. And all those committee chairs in both sides of the Hill will have a subpoena power, and they're going to use it. You can see what happened in the hearings with Brett Kavanaugh, with Cory Booker's performance and Kamala Harris's performance. They are raring to go, and they can't wait to get the subpoena power. And Joe and Mika, I think they're going to play it. Now, that doesn't necessarily end up well. I mean, we saw back in the 80th Congress, back after after the Republicans came into power back in '46, and they blew it because all they did was hold hearings. But I think this time it's different. I think people want to have some hearings. They want some control on Trump. And one thing that's really changed, the suburbs, Joe, where I grew up, right on the Philadelphia's edge, those Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, even up in the swing part of the state, they're going to vote for Allentown. They are going to Lehigh Valley. They are going to vote Democrat for those women candidates, all four of them. I think all four of those women win. I think that the whole structure of the East Coast. What happens is, I think, 2 months from now, people are going to vote the way we all thought they were going to vote in 2016 for Hillary. But there'll be no Hillary factor. It'll just be you don't like Trump. And I think that's the big challenge. Our family was 3-2 of the brothers, 3-2 Trump. This time it's going to be 2-3 against Trump. So I think one of my brothers just switched. So and he lives in Bucks County. I tell you, I think the suburbs are going to vote the way they did. They were supposed to vote last time, which was anti-Trump, but there'll be no Hillary factor to disturb that pattern.
Could be fascinating. We shall see. We all hold back from completely prognosticating.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.